I am joined today by an old friend. His name is Calvin. Hello, Calvin.
Hello.
Now, you're not in the UK, which, looking at you right now, looking at the background, it doesn't say anything of where you are in the world. So, for people who see a white wall behind you, where exactly are you in the world right now?
My white wall is simple like me. I am in Kenya. I'm based in Nairobi, uh, but I also travel around Kenya quite a lot. So today I'm in a place called Gong, which is just outside Nairobi.
Cool. Okay. Now, just go back a little bit in time because you're in Kenya now. We'll come back to that in a while. But we got to know in Southampton quite a number of years ago, which is how we touched base, and we've touched base again, which is really cool. I love how God kind of inspires conversations and all that kind of stuff. But let's just go back in time for you. What's your story of faith? How did you first meet God, and all that kind of stuff?
That's a big story. So I didn't know God all my life. In fact, I was 27 when I come to Christ. I was born again. I'm now 37, so it's 10 years. Um, I I was actually born again in Kenya.
Wow.
So I was quite sick with Crohn's disease, and was struggling with life. And I met a man on a day of work. I was hired in on a building job, and I was talking to the man and said, "Oh, I'd love to go to a third world country to experience it." And I was very, very sick at the time. And he said to me, "Oh, I've got a small trip going out to Kenya in 6 weeks." So I jokingly asked him, "Can I come with you?" Anyway, 6 weeks later, I was on a plane to Nairobi, which I then found out was a Christian mission trip. So I told the man, "Look, I'm not interested in the Bible bashing stuff." I said, um, and he said, "That's fine, that's fine." So I was going out to teach healthcare because I was a coordinator of a domiciliary care uh, business at one point. So we go out, have a great time. We went to a place called Kibera, which is a huge slum on the edge of Nairobi. Um, the Sunday come, and I said, I'll respectfully come to church." The senior pastor of the church at the start was a bit like, "Why is he with us? He's not born again. What use is he to us um, in Africa?" So yeah, that was uh, during the service. Um, I sat at the back. They wanted us to sit on these cushioned chairs at the front, and no one was in the church at the time. Um, and yes, I refused to sit on the cushioned chairs. I was like, "That's not for me. I'll sit at the back." And quietly, quietly be by myself. Um, anyway, a moment of madness come over me, and I sort of asked God, "If you're real, where are you? And where have you been all my life?" And within an instant, I felt a presence surround me and embrace me. So yeah, but uh, after that, I asked what something strange happened to me. What do you think it was? "Oh, it's Holy Spirit." And I just thought, "Oh, typical Christians trying to convert." Um, and then and then after that, I got home. I never struggled with Crohn's disease again.
Wow.
So I had a healing from that, and yeah, so I give my life to Christ. I went to theology school for 6 years, and at the end of theology school, I was going to carry on and do a master's, but I really felt the call of God to come back, and I knew from that first trip I was meant to be here. Even before I was understood discipleship or anything like that. So, and when I finished my degree in theology, I uh, uh, I really felt God pull me to come and live in Kenya. So I packed my bags. Everyone said I was mad. Everyone said I'd be killed. I said, okay, I'll see you later. And I went. So here I am, 2 and a bit years later, still alive, still serving God. Um, and I've never been more alive in my life. So I'm just living the dream here in Kenya.
Fab. I don't know Kenya other than the name of a country and somewhere on the South African continent. That is why I did not do very well at school. But I mean, in my head, do you have giraffes past the window, or is that like a whole other thing?
You know, I went and lived with a tribe called the Maasai, which are quite a commonly known tribe if you look at pictures of Kenya. But they're a very unreached tribe. They're very traditional. They're like 300 years behind everyone else. And when I lived out there with them last year for 3 months, we had hyenas, gazelle, elephant, giraffe, ostrich. There was one point when I was walking by myself in the bush, and I accidentally startled an ostrich that quickly stood up the other side of the hedge from me and ran off, which I thought my life was over at that point. And there was another time when I was we were going out to do some evangelist mission far away from the main road. And I was on a motorbike, and it startled some gazelle, and the baby gazelle jumped and landed between me and the rider. So do we keep this or do we put it back? I'm not sure. So yes, some of it, and in when I mainly serve is in Kibera still in the slum in the ghetto. So obviously there we have monkeys, that's it, and the odd eagle and pelican.
Fair
But
enough.
yes.
So, just for those who don't know what Crohn's disease is, I mean, you were saying you've been healed from it. In itself, let's just unpack that a little bit. What is Crohn's disease, and how did it affect you?
Crohn's disease is a disease of the stomach. Not the stomach, sorry, the bowel. My bowel was consistently inflated, and I would struggle to put on weight, to in the end it took over my life. Without being too crude for those squeamish people, I couldn't, toilet was regularly, sometimes a lot of blood loss. So that was a day-to-day life for me, to the point where I couldn't really work anymore. I would just do an odd day with a friend in a building site or something like that. So yeah, it really stopped my life to the point, which is quite horrible for your stomach to be consistently problematic.
But then you went to Kenya to go and see the sights, I guess, at one level, and rather than the experience you had perhaps anticipated, God had other plans, which I'm very, very grateful for, and he met you in a beautiful context. I love the fact that the pastor said, what good is he to us? Yeah. It's a lot of good to God.
And now I'm shoulder to shoulder with him serving Kenya. So yes, what good am I to him? But yes, it was almost like God was waiting for me to call out to him, because I was an atheist. I was a strong atheist. I tried God when I was a child. It didn't work. So I was a strong atheist. You live, you die. That was it. You do your best while you're here. So yeah, and it totally changed my life, changed my behaviors. I still have some to work on, but the worst of the worst was just changed my heart, the way I think, everything, in an instant.
Wow.
People love the physical healing of Crohn's, but I think one of the biggest things people miss in my testimony is the healing of the heart. I'm from the working class, the council estate. lived on council estate all my life. And yeah, father was drunk, things like that. You know, they affect your heart in the long term, and the healing of that as well, or a big chunk of that was, to me, is the bigger testimony than the Crohn's disease. So I'm very thankful for that.
It's interesting. I heard God's voice audibly once when I was about 15, 16. And when I share that story with people, well, what did he sound like? And I'd say, I don't know. It's what he said that mattered to me. It's the fact he spoke to me at all that actually was matters. And it's the words that he used at the perfect moment that I actually heard his audible voice. But people get more interested. Well, what did he sound like? Well, I still don't know. Couldn't tell you. I just know what he said, and that matters more than what accent he may have had, which is kind of a redundant point because he's God, right? So if he's everywhere all the time, he can speak any language, any dialect, you know, we can speak without words. So it's interesting, isn't it, how we hook into the physical element of something, which isn't necessarily the most valuable, precious moment.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And I love the way God is always personal.
Yeah.
Like, what does he sound like? I think he sounds like me because he's talking to me. And he doesn't talk to you in a different way you wouldn't understand. He talks to you how you would know. So yeah, I think the personalness of God, in the relationship with God, how it's just you and him in those moments is the most powerful. I think anyway.
But God was clearly at work because when you're in the UK, you've got major stomach issues. You can't do more than perhaps a day's work randomly. You then think, oh, let's go to Kenya. I mean, you're on a plane a long time. You're away from medical help and all of the stuff that we would think, well, we need these things because we're not very healthy. And yet you went so very clearly from your own testimony. God was already calling you, but for you to a different continent, to a different country. So perhaps I guess you could hear him more easily.
Yes, maybe, but yeah, he definitely had a plan, and for once in my life, I obviously walked the path of the plan he had, rather than straying off to a different plan. But yeah, so it was almost like the stars aligned, and God, God, God had a plan, and I believe it was for me to be here.
Amen. So let's just skip to the present day then. So you're now in Kenya, you're near Nairobi. You talked about living with a Maasai for a while. You've talked about how you're working in one of the local slums. But what's your day-to-day mission? What is it you're actually doing that God has called you to do in Kenya?
Hey, well, good question. Because when I got here, I was a bit like, now what do I do? I worked with a small church team since 2014. So and I used to lead a drug rehabilitation for young people. So we used to use the 12-step program and to recovery, and I used to coordinate that, support the guys. Then we sort of broke away, and I was here on my own. So I just started doing what I knew, and I was really praying, what do I do, God? What do I do? What am I, like? Do I just sit in the church and do pastory things? I'm not really a pastor. Um, my mission is to be out with people, and so I come across some young lads who were typical boys, shall we say, on the slum, and I sat and talked to them for a bit. And there was about 10, 12 of them, and they told me about their drug problems and how they drink, and we're talking they're only 16, 17, and I said to them, knowing the answer, I said to them, okay, so you have no money, you live on a slum, and you take drugs daily and alcohol daily. I said, where'd you get your money for it from? Knowing the answer, but seeing if they were going to be honest with me. And they were. They just said, well, if you ever hear of anyone being mugged here, or any phones stolen, it's us. I said, oh, okay. I wasn't quite ready for that answer. So I said, okay then. And all I could think of, and I think it was God that put these words in my mouth, was, okay, well, how about Monday night you come to my house for dinner and we'll sit and we'll talk and we'll read some Bible. And one part of my head was saying, this is great. Other part of my head was saying, Calvin, you are mental. And so that started, and we called it the Mbogi group. So Mbogi is there's a language here. There's over 60 languages in Kenya, but it's a Sheng language. It's a young sort of ghetto language, slang language, which means my people group. So we called it the Mbogi group. And every Monday we read the Bible, and my ministry really grew from that. I mean, out of the 11, only 2 are still in the same position. The rest have started small businesses or gone to work and things like that. So without any of my money. So they did it themselves by just reading the Bible. They just sort of bettered themselves. And only 2 that I know of are still in the same position. And from that grew ministry with just these young people on the streets. So there's this thing called a Piki Piki rider or Boda Boda rider, which is the motorbike taxi. And they have this terrible reputation of being rude and arrogant and on drugs and things like that. So from that group, the Piki Piki riders began to get to know me or hear about me. And then we started ministry with them. And it just got bigger and bigger. And then there's another group called Chokora. We call Chokora, which is street child, but these street children, they grow up to be adults and still on the street. So then we started with the Piki Piki boys and the Mbogi group. We started taking porridge to them, and as they were sorting through the rubbish, and praying with them. So my ministry is for those who church miss. In Kenya, there's a real sense of you've got to look smart. You've got to, these people are not church people, sort of, and I think my mission is to break that barrier. And I do a small thing where I've meet some children who really have nothing. There's so much need on Kabir, but there's a handful that really had nothing and were becoming Chokora because they didn't have school. So I've sort of helped try and find some people unofficially to help get them in school and change their direction. So that's what I do. I just help those at the very bottom of society, whilst also fulfilling the mission of the church that I'm linked to here. So it's busy. The first 2 years I lived on the slum, which was interesting. People's reactions back at home and people's reactions here was a bit like, why is this white man living on the slum? Like, we don't want to live here, and he could live somewhere else, but he's living here. And I was like, no, I really need to understand, how can I minister to someone? How could I interpret the Bible to someone if I don't know how they live? If I don't buy the vegetables where they buy vegetables, if I don't get my hair cut where they get their hair cut, if I don't walk the street at night and understand what's going on. So I planted myself within, and great things have happened. So that's what I do. I think I've answered your question, or have I talked too much?
No, definitely not talking too much, and you have answered the question. And I would just sum it up as, you're somebody who's willing to take a risk on other people because someone was willing to take a risk on you, which to me is the core heart of what should be the gospel, that we're willing to invest into others that others would not be willing to invest into, because Jesus already was willing to invest into us.
Absolutely. And if we're not like, I don't believe in a lukewarm gospel. I believe people say, and I've heard it said about like heroes like Jackie Pullinger. Oh, they have a special ministry. No, they don't. They just heard God and done it.
Yeah.
There's no special radical. It's like you're either all in or all out, in my opinion. There's no lukewarm sort of Christian for me.
I guess they would be the first one to say, we're not special. We're just doing what God asked us to do. He
Exactly.
opened some doors and we were willing to walk through. I would say exactly the same in a different
Mm,
context with what we're doing with Pure. God said, could you
mm,
do this? And we did. And we keep walking while he's opening the doors. It's different sort of ministry, but it's the basic core same of God asked. We were willing to say, okay.
mm. And yes, yes, absolutely. And the doors he opens, even when we really screw up. I've made some blinding mistakes out there. Um, I'm far from perfect. You know, but God always manages a way of you continuing. Sometimes I've made mistakes and I've got on my knees and prayed and said, Lord, if this is the end, so be it. But if you want me to carry on, show me something. And then something huge has happened that only I could deal with,
Hmm.
and showed many people like, oh yeah, he is anointed, or he is anointed, he is meant to be here. Um, so yeah, definitely doors opening, and people not being able to shut the door that God
Mm-hmm.
has opened. I think that Revelation verse is so important as well, because many people could have shut doors, and they haven't shut. So I'm thankful for him, and I'm thankful that he's let me carry on this far. And hopefully, my dream is that I stay here and just serve him to the end. So yes.
Which is beautiful. And you're seeing the fruit of that. I mean, living in a slum is a huge, it's a huge risk unless God has led you to do that, in which case
Mhm.
yes, it's still the same risk, but actually it doesn't matter anymore because well, God's called you, so you'll be there to do what He wants you to do, and that's what I've loved
Mm.
just touching base with you again, seeing what you're doing now, and thinking, I love how God is at work in your life. It's not easy though, is it? But you keep walking forward. I describe it this way because we've been living by faith since 2004 in different ways, and it's a bit like whitewater rafting without the raft. That's how it feels to live a life of faith.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Um, absolutely. You just don't know what is next, and you think sometimes I think, oh, we're in a calm, which just means brace yourself because something's coming. Uh, um, I'm giving you a slight bit of rest here, but no, it's so hard emotionally, mentally, financially. It's so hard, but somehow it works. And if you take your eyes off of God at any point, you're falling.
Mm,
There was one point I nearly quit, and I took my eyes off of God, and it looked like I was falling off a cliff. And the minute I put my eyes back on God, it was, ah, yes, of course. Why? Well, how can I leave? How can I leave when there's so much to do? How can I leave when God is leading me here?
mm.
Like no one else is here apart from me, and I'm only here because of Him. So yes, I just keeping my eyes on God is the most important thing. And secondly, I've come to a place really. If you haven't got the gift of faith, you'll struggle with this sort of mission. I mean, it's grew me. I thought I had faith before I come out here. I realized I had no faith really. Turning up to church on a Sunday and helping it was not faith. I've had to really put my faith in God and really learn to pray. But yes, it's been the most challenging yet the most incredible journey anyone could go on.
Wow. Catherine, thank you for sharing some of this stuff because I think very often we look at what's going on in the world. We think, well, we need this solution, and the solution seems to be this inordinately complicated, intricate, a million moving parts. So we don't even bother trying because, hey, what can we do? But we can always help one person, which is exactly what you did. And then that's kind of grown other things of people helping, which is the whole gospel thing, isn't it? We help one person who help two people who help two lots of individuals. Now that's four people, and it grows and grows and grows, which is what you're doing.
Yes, and yeah, absolutely. And you're right. There's so many solutions. I call them the isms. You have socialism, conservatism, feminism, all these things that are meant to be fixing things, but actually it's just take one person at a time. And Kibera is it goes around an unwanted bit of land in Nairobi, and it's based on a slope by the river, and it's 5 miles long and 3 miles wide. So, to my understanding, it's the biggest urban slum in the world, and it has easily 1 million people living on top of each other. There's no way I'm going to fix Kibera, but what I can do is just pray who God gives me, and just take that person and show them Jesus, and lead them the way. Yeah, and it's quite easy to feel overwhelmed. You've got to do this, you've got to do that, you've got to do this. This needs doing, this needs doing, but actually it's one person at a time. And yeah, and God just makes it huge, without an NGO, without anything like that. Just God, the Holy Spirit moving. It's mission.
It's beautiful, mate. Honestly, I'm so glad to have reconnected with you, which is just really exciting. We're going to connect to your Facebook page when we put this post out as a video later, and then people can connect with you. But I love your heart, and I just want to say thank you for what you're doing, because so often we look at things, and there was a cartoon I saw years ago which just came back to mind really vividly, and it was of a brand new church in this cartoon that someone had drawn, and this church was saying, where's all the, we need the families, we need the people who are high earners, there's no one to serve, no one's coming to our church. And in the back of the cartoon you can easily see an old people's home next to an old person's home next to an old people's home, and there's no one to serve in this area, because they wanted the rich people to make the church bigger so they could grow, and they missed the fact there were people on their doorstep. And I've forgotten who wrote the cartoon, but it was really powerful, and it stayed with me because you've done exactly what they didn't. You've said, hi guys, how you doing? And you've had a conversation, and that conversation has then led you to be able to have the right to tell your story as they tell you theirs.
Yes, and yeah, and it's been amazing. The way you connect with people. Like, I remember praying for a group of people to connect with, and I thought, God, I have no idea how to do this. So I prayed, and that night, and the next morning, I was sat next to a guy. So I started talking to him, waiting, and he turned out to be from this group, and I'm like, oh, thank you, Lord. Like, and then we become really good friends with the group within 24 hours. And so yeah, it's not me. I can take no credit for anything. It's not me. It is purely God. All I do is walk. I just walk in the direction. God does the rest. If it was me, it would be a disaster by now, and you would have a headline in the UK, mad Britishman in Kenya or something like that. But it's all God. It's all God.
It's all God, and your faithfulness and willingness to say yes, which is what many people perhaps would be less inclined to do. So, Calvin, keep going, mate. Honestly, thank you for your time. Looking at your window, what's it like? Because I'm sitting here right now, and we've got frost. What's the weather where you are right now?
Summertime here. It's summer, so it's been this week. This week it's been The lowest it's been is 26. So, I just wish it's my day after day. I just wish I had some spare money to go to the swimming pool. But to step outside, I had a bit of an ordeal on Monday because it was 29 and I couldn't find any public transport home. So for 4 hours I was stood in the sun, and now my nose is pink and my forehead is pink, and um, so yes, it's lovely. February will be even better. Um, so yeah.
Fair enough. Calvin in Kenya, serving God as only you can, as he calls. Thank you for sharing some of that story. It's really, really encouraging to me to hear what you're talking about. So I pray you have a really good rest of your day, and that God continues to bless you and lead you through that power of prayer and open door. Calvin, thank you.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate it. And I hope that you get all the blessings, and your radio show really does carry on the best it can,
Thank you.
because you're blessing so many people to hear their stories.